The other day on the Range Minded podcast, we talked about what Congress is doing to fight for your rights. And honestly, I think there's a lot of context in that show that proves that there are some great constitutionally minded people still fighting for your rights. They understand the constitutional republic, and they're trying to preserve not just the Second Amendment, but all of our rights. But it seems kind of funny, as has been proven in times past, that any time that there are some major gun legislation coming down the pipeline to be brought to the limelight, that a tragedy strikes. Now, let me preface by saying this. Any loss of life by any murder is disgusting. It creates despair, it creates anger, and it creates pain. And my heart does go out to those families of the 6 people killed in Tennessee. Like I said, any murder, no matter by what device, is sad. It is horrible. But murder is not caused by the device used. Murder is caused by the evil desires of whoever is perpetrating said murder. So, where do we go from here? Obviously, President Biden and almost everybody on the left, including the mainstream media, is immediately calling for, yet again, assault weapons ban. In fact, they say that 95% of all Americans want to ban assault rifles. Maybe because when they make those phone calls or however they create this survey, they don't really share all the information. Otherwise, how could there be hundreds of millions, well, maybe not that many. There are over 400 million firearms privately owned in the United States, more than many militaries throughout the world, which is great. They say there's around 20 million, which I'm guessing that number is much, much higher, AR-15 style firearms in the United States. Why would that rifle or variants thereof be so scary to the left, to the gun ban lobby, to Everytown, to Moms Demand Action, and many other of those negative anti-2A groups? Don't buy into their lies that saying that they don't want to take away your guns. They do. They do not believe in the Second Amendment. Just peruse their website and some of their social media posts, and it's evident in a short amount of time that, yeah, they do want to remove your right. They'll tell you that no other domesticated country in the world has issues like we do. Yet they ignore the millions of people that are killed from drug overdoses that come across the country, from the southern border and honestly the northern border. They don't want to talk to you about the cartels that shoot up thousands of people on the streets of Mexico and across the border in some cases. They don't want to talk to you about child sex trafficking. They don't want to talk to you about abortion numbers. They only want to talk about the heinous killing by a murderer that chooses to use a firearm. And they blame said tool that the murderer decides to use. This is disingenuous, it's unfair, and it's strictly targeting something that honestly does more good than bad in the world. Yes, that's what I just said. Now, you won't be able to find these numbers anymore, but in 2011, the CDC decided to do a report on defensive gun use in the United States. And what they found out was, yes, firearms are used thousands of times a day in defense of life. Now, that may include police, but it also includes, yes, privately owned, legally carried firearms in defense of life. Why is that number never being told? Because it doesn't fit their narrative. They want you and other people across the United States and honestly the world to believe that guns are only used to enact death. They don't want to talk about how knives are used, how hands or feet are used, how cars are used, and drugs and other things. In fact, anything can be an assault weapon if you're using it to assault someone. Now, I know many of you feel like, yeah, I know that, Steve. That's nothing new. But there are still people, it seems, that need to hear that and need to understand that. Now, let's talk about the semi-automatic rifle for a minute. When was the first semi-automatic rifle produced? Now, some of you might say, well, 1947, the AK was created, and that's correct. But there were some even before that. You can go to some amazing German firearms that were made in the 30s. You can think about John Moses Browning, which was even before that. But we have to jump back clear in to 1885. Yes, 1885 is when the first semi-automatic rifle was produced by a man named, and unfortunately this is his last name, Mannlicher. Be that as it may, he was the first creator of the semi-automatic rifle. That was 1885. Now, it might be tough to find any information on mass shootings that perpetrated by the Mannlicher firearm. Again, that's an unfortunate last name. But it is what it is. Now, the AR-15 was designed in the 50s and brought into use in the 60s. I don't remember hearing any kind of mass shooting issues perpetrated by that nasty AR-15 in 1970 or 80s. It wasn't really even till 1995 when we saw the first real school shooting publicized in the United States. Now, I say publicized because there was violence in schools long before that. In fact, I'll have to do some research. I believe the first school shooting was long before that. I think it was actually even before the 1800s. I'll have to look up the report again. The problem is not the firearm. The problem is the hatred that's being propagated towards one another. That's what it is. If you believe in the Bible, you can look clear back to Cain and Abel. He used a rock to kill his brother out of jealousy. Cain used a rock to kill his brother. Assault rock, I guess, would have been the time. There's throughout history. Look at Julius Caesar. Yeah. Well, man, now my history is really going. He was stabbed to death. It was a mass stabbing in the Senate floor. Not from an assault knife, but from a group of people that hated him. Yes, hate is the issue. So why won't anyone in high society, in politics or otherwise, mainstream media, why won't they look at what's causing the hate? What's causing the discontent? Maybe because violence creates views. Violence generates action. We must do something. But why are they so bound and determined to take away my right and your right to defend ourselves from tyranny, to defend ourselves from an attacker? When the Constitution was written and the Second Amendment was put in the Bill of Rights, it was not there for hunting. It was not placed there for target practice. It is a pronounced right, may I say a God-given right, put in the founding documents to preserve us from a tyrannical government. Where did these men come from with that idea? What in their history may have happened that they felt the need to put that as the second amendment in our Constitution, the second most important thing that needs to be spelled out and given to us? Yes, I know, the First Amendment has more than one thing in it. I get it. They fought a battle against a tyrannical government that was trying to impose ridiculous requirements upon a sovereign country. Yes, I know at that time we weren't our own country yet, but we were fighting to be free from a king who was imposing terrible taxes and ridiculous requirements that our founding fathers said was enough is enough. When will we have to decide enough is enough? What happens if we lose the Second Amendment? Maybe nothing. Do you think a tyrannical government would stop at the defense of ourselves? No. We already see a push against religion. We already see a push against speech. Soon we won't be able to read the books that we want to read. Of course, the left is already saying that's taking place. And maybe it is, maybe it's not. Nonetheless, each one of those is a freedom guaranteed in the Constitution. The Constitution was not written. Now, this almost sounds contradictory to what I just said. The Constitution, the Bill of Rights, is not written to tell the government what rights we can have. The Constitution is and was written to limit the power of the federal government. The reason why we have a federation of states is to say each state has the ability to govern its citizens within. The federal government is only there to fulfill the needs of safety and sovereignty. Now, the firearm used in this latest shooting, actually 3 firearms, was not an assault rifle. Yes, I've seen the pictures of this deranged girl, and yes, I call her a girl. She was a girl that felt she was a boy. I don't know what things took place in her life. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me now is that she's taking a dirt nap. She raged through that school with hate and anger, which I don't know where it was generated from. She was a lunatic. She was a psycho. Yes, anyone that perpetrates hate to the point of murder has major psychological issues. And I do not apologize for that. And now she is where she needs to be. And I thank the police officers that had the fortitude to enter that building. Within 14 minutes of the whole escapade inside that school was 14 minutes. Those police officers with courage entered that school and resolved the threat. Yes, unfortunately, there were 6 lives taken, 3 children and 3 administrators. Again, it sucks. It is not the fault of the firearm. It is not the fault of the state. It is not the fault of the school, and it is not the fault of millions and millions of gun owners in the United States. It solely lands on the murderer herself. Again, back to the firearm. She used a Kel-Tec Sub 2000. We can only assume it was chambered in 9mm. They make some in other calibers. Now it accepts standard capacity Glock mags, but I guess you could buy some larger capacity magazines. Still legal to purchase in the United States, as they should be. She did have an AR-15 style rifle. She did not use it. It didn't fit the narrative. She had a handgun, which appeared to be Smith & Wesson Easy. I don't know if it was a 380 or 9mm. Doesn't matter. She chose not to use it. But what she did choose is the school. And why she chose the school was because she felt it was an easier target. It was an easier place to get into and an easier place to perpetrate the things that she felt she needed to do. Now, why didn't she choose another school? It said apparently in her manifesto. I have not read it, but apparently in the manifesto that she wrote, she chose that school because it was easier to get into. The other schools she had chosen must have had armed guards or some sort of resistance, some sort of protocol to keep predators out. What does that mean for you and me? Well, it means being armed at all times makes us the immediate responder. Any mass shooting and every mass shooting in the United States or anywhere else is stopped by a gun. Now that gun may be the personal gun of the idiot trying to cause hate and fear, or it's by a gun from a good guy. Can United States citizens be the good guy? Absolutely. Again, back to that CDC report in 2011. Thousands of good guys every day use firearms in defense. Thousands to defend life. Thousands. Again, you won't see that number anywhere else. Now, they'll tell you, the left, that the leading cause of death among children is guns. Guns do not cause death. They do not. Maybe in a gun accident is still a misuse, but it's not the gun. Somebody has to pull the trigger. But there's a pesky fact about this statistic that they keep vomiting out. They regurgitate like a angry penguin trying to feed her chicks. That statistic is inaccurate. 85% of that number of children being killed by guns are ages 15 to 19. Now, 18 and 19-year-olds, and honestly, some very younger, we see history of crime cases throughout the United States that kids as young as 14, 15 are being tried as adults if their crimes are heinous enough. So why aren't these included in the adults, especially 18 and 19-year-olds? Because it doesn't fit their narrative. There are many other things that are killing children in the United States. Obesity, accidents, drownings, medical malpractice. But they don't want you to know that. They just want to say that the guns are responsible for children dying. And again, it's inaccurate. You don't have to believe me. You can look up the stats yourself. I have. It takes a few minutes on Google. Friends, our fight for our rights has never been as important as it is now. Never in this history of this great country has the enemy come from within so vehemently. The president, a huge portion of Congress, the mainstream media, they're all ginning up fear and hate to remove the rights of a vast amount of Americans. People that legally own their firearms, that pass their background checks. Every firearm that's purchased by an FFL dealer has to go through a background check. That's federal law. It was done in the 80s and still is done now. Yes, private people can buy and sell firearms as it may. Now, there could be some protocols made there. That's fine. We can look into it. But we have to be careful not to infringe on rights. Our freedoms are more important than safety. That's the fact. It's frustrating that we have to have these conversations. It is sad that death happens in the United States, but it's not firearms death that is the only thing that kills people in the United States. Again, we see fentanyl use coming across the borders that is killing millions of Americans, at least hundreds of thousands. There is death across the border. The cartels kill many people. Human trafficking is a major issue. Medical malpractice is a major issue. One other major issue is mental health, and it's something that has to be addressed. But it all is getting swept under the carpet. What can we do as citizens, as good Second Amendment loving, law-abiding citizens? We need to make our voices heard. We need to show that thousands of people in every state who own firearms legally don't kill people. We just don't. If guns were the issue, then why are not thousands of more people who legally purchase these guns going out and mowing their fellow citizens down? It doesn't happen. Why? Because it's not the gun. It's the hate. It's the dark heart of so many people across the United States. And the key is figuring out what is generating the hate, what is generating the fear, and how we combat it. Now, I feel like it's the lack of God in society. Maybe you feel like it's something else. Perhaps it's the the increasing number of fatherless homes, where these mostly young men that perpetrate these shootings have no father figure, so they fall into gangs or other resources to help them grow up. which lead them down the wrong track? I don't know the answer. The answer is difficult. The answer is hard. And I'm sure at some point we all need to sit down and have a serious conversation on what needs to be done. But for me and my house and many of my friends, we will not give up our firearms. It is a constitutional right to own and bear a gun in this country. All people in this country have rights. All citizens in this country have rights, and we have the obligation to exercise those rights, or we lose them. I will always exercise my Second Amendment. My kids will always recognize and exercise their Second Amendment. I've taught them how to safely handle firearms. I keep them locked up, and they learn. None of my kids have ever used a firearm in malice. Honestly, none of my kids have used any kind of weapon in malice. I don't know why. Maybe it's because somebody taught them how to be respectful. Who knows? The answers are out there. But very first thing that we need to do is make our voices heard. And we're not sheep. And we will not sit down and be quiet. I'm not calling for violence. I'm not calling for riots, no matter how peaceful they may be. But we can protest. We can make our voices heard. We can share our opinions on social media. If you have people or friends or family that will hate you at that point, well, that's their problem, not yours. You are who you are. You are an American citizen, and you need to fight for your rights. And that starts with opening your mouth. Friends, be safe. Take care. Fight the good fight. Make sure you listen to the Range Minded podcast. I have to plug that. Make your voices heard. Be safe.